Welcome to the Learning and Development Channel, where you can learn, lead, and make a difference.
To start the orientation, what is the Depth Order number 35, Series 2025? So we have to start where the learners are. So check, hi, ba't ating mga learners? What language are they using at home, in school? What are they familiar at? The power of language in early learning. So it is to understanding critical role of child's first language as a foundational bridge to literacy and cognitive development. What the child is using the language at home should be the one that you will use in the mode of instruction. So the current situation for many school children, the choice of a language is a recurrent challenge in the development of quality education. Speakers of mother tongues, which are not the same as the national language, are often at considerable disadvantage in the educational system. So the current situation for many school children, 50% of the world's out-of-school children live in the communities where the language of school is rarely, if ever, used at home. This underscores the biggest challenge to achieving education for all, a legacy of non-productive practices that lead to low levels of learning and high levels of dropout and repetition. One of the examples there is ito na mga basic words like especially if add to it in mga far-flung areas, they don't understand, they cannot understand. And when our children go to school, they go to an alien place. They leave their parents, they leave their gardens, they leave everything that is their way of life. They sit in a classroom, they learn things that they have nothing to do with their own place. Later, because they have learned only other things, they respect their own. So in school, it's an alien place for them, especially mga kinder. So the languages in MLP, what is the goal for children in local language communities? They will build a strong educational foundation in their first language, for L1. They will also learn one or more additional languages, L2 at the foundation, for learning L2 and L3. L2 at Filipino, L3 English, and they will use both, all languages for lifelong learning. The end result, children who are multilingual, multiliterate, multicultural. So this is actually the goal. Multilingual, multiliterate, and multicultural. So what is the linguistic map, a national overview here in the Philippines? In the Philippines, we are a diverse nation. Ganan nini, ganaray kita. Pagkadto habaybay, Cebuano, Binisaya. Pagkadto sa Hamar, ganaray, pero iba't term. Diba? May mga term na iba. So, because Philippines is a linguistically diverse nation. So what are we going to do? Identify the primary language of every community, tailor instruction to learners' linguistic reality, ensure equity across all regions and ethnic groups. So the first language of a child, we have this cognitive anchor. Learning in a familiar language removes the language barrier to understand concepts. Ini ang ating one is based on research. According to research, the first language of a child that will be used in the instruction will remove the language barrier to understand the concept. Then, there's an identity. Validating the child's home language builds self-esteem and cultural pride. And lastly, this will be the bridge. The L1 is the strongest foundation for learning Filipino and English. So addressing the literacy gap. The need for language one support, the national and international assessments reveal low proficiency levels in reading. Second to the national and international assessment reveals proficiency levels in reading. Addressing these gaps requires instruction in a language learner student. So what is language mapping? According to Depth Order 35, Series 2025, language mapping is data collection, gathering information of the specific languages learners use at home and in the community. Then we have the visualization, mapping linguistic profiles to determine most effective MOI. This is evidence-based, ensuring school policies reflect the actual linguistic reality of the learners. So why do we need to do this? Number one is informed decision making. To decide which language scenarios, and akong considering kanina, A, B, C, or D, best suits the classroom context. So ano the purpose? Para makapag-decide kita in what language, what mode of instruction are we going to use. Equity and access, let learner-centered to acknowledge every child's right to access quality education in a language they can understand. Klaro ito, in a language they can understand para they will be able to learn, to have quality education based on the language they can comprehend. Equity and access to identify diverse language needs, including those for indigenous people and SPED learners. And resource planning to guide the development of quality instructional materials and teacher capacity building. So identifying the child's first language, the child's perspective. For a Filipino child, the home language is where meaning is first constructed. Identifying this language allows teachers to connect new concepts to prior knowledge. So, i-connect mo ang iya prior knowledge na dahil mo new concept. Reduce anxiety in the learning environment. Then, encourage active classroom participation. Instructional implications. Identifying the child's L1 is not just administrative. It's pedagogical. It determines how teachers use. So this is the word kanina, translanguaging, moving between language 1 and English or Filipino. Then oral scaffolding, explaining complex ideas in the auxiliary language and bridging systematic transition to L2 literacy. The bridge to literacy. So reading is a complex cognitive skill, right? Reading is a complex cognitive skill that relies heavily on oral language proficiency. When we identify a child's language, we ensure that phonemic awareness is built on familiar sounds. Diba? Kailangan maarami ang mga sounds familiar to yung mga bata. Vocabulary expansion and comprehension. So according to research, a child who can read in their level 1 or language 1 develops the cognitive strategies needed to become a proficient reader in English and Filipino. According to research, implication for reading. Reading in the revised K-10 curriculum starts with meaning, identifying the language of the child ensures. The phonemic awareness is built on known words, oral fluency supports the reading comprehension, and reduce cognitive load during initial literacy. So regions, the reading brain. So regions of the brain associated with reading. We have this, the frontal area, we have the phonological processor, then we have the phonological assembly, alin ang iyang part, then orthographic processor.
Theoretical models. The simple view of reading. So it starts with decoding, then language comprehension, left the child decodes and is able to comprehend the language. That is equivalent to reading comprehension. So that's according to Goff and Tanner in 1986. So the simple view of reading is the widely accepted scientific framework that explains the reading comprehension as the product of two distinct cognitive skills, decoding and language comprehension. The two components, decoding or word recognition, is the ability to look at written letters, translate them into their corresponding sounds or phonics, recognize or sound out words accurately and fluently. Language comprehension, the other hand, is the ability to understand the meaning of spoken language once the words are recognized. They relies heavily on readers' vocabulary, background knowledge, and understanding of grammar. Why is it called simple view of reading? Well, the act of reading is highly complex. The formula demonstrates that reading comprehension relies entirely on both of these fundamental pillars being present. because they are multiplied together if either skill is at 0. The final reading comprehension score also will be 0. For example, a strong decoder with poor language comprehension, they can read the words in the page out loud perfectly, but will have no idea what the text means. A strong listener with poor decoding can understand complex conversations easily, but will be unable to read the words off the page. So why this framework matters? Teachers and reading specialists use the simple view to pinpoint exactly why a student is struggling with reading. By determining if the barrier's mechanical issue, which is decoding, or a meaning-making issue, language comprehension, teachers can deliver highly targeted instructions. Under DPED Order Number 35, Series of 2025, which operationalizes the language mapping process in accordance to Republic Act Number 12027, DPED outlines 4 distinct language use scenarios to determine the medium of instructions, MOI, for kindergarten to grade 3 phase-stage 1 learners. These scenarios adapt the linguistic profiling of the community rather than imposing a blanket rule. So let's start with scenario A, Filipino and English as the primary mode of instruction. So they are applied in a highly multilingual or urban settings where learners already speak diverse home language. So the rule here is the Filipino and the English serves directly as the primary mediums of instructions from kindergarten. So these are highly urban settings that have monolingual contexts, either have Filipino and English. In scenario B, Filipino and English with regional language as auxiliary. These are used in communities where a regional language is common, but learners still maintain varying levels of fluency. So the Filipino and English remain as the primary mode of instruction, but teachers use the original language as a support or auxiliary tool to clarify and explain the complex lessons. In scenario C, first language as the primary mode of instruction with gradual transition. So these are reserved for qualified monolingual classes where learners share a single dominant native language. The rule is the learner's mother tongue is used as the primary mode of instruction initially, followed by a gradual introduction and transition to Filipino and English. This requires an official orthography published by the Commission so we can Filipino and train teachers. Scenario D is on the indigenous language as the primary mode of instruction with gradual transition. So these are specifically designed for indigenous peoples, education programs, and communities. The specific IP language is utilized with the primary mode of instruction to preserve cultural and linguistic heritage with a structured, gradual transition toward Filipino, and English as the student progresses. Bridging and translanguaging. Pedagogical strategies show scaffolding as necessary to use in this context. Will we use the language one to explain the complex language two concepts. Another strategy is translanguaging, where we allow our learners to use their full linguistic repertoire to learn. Then another strategy is meta-linguistic awareness, where we help children to see the similarities between their language 1 and language 2. So we have here the impact of L1 support on learning. So this approach targets the crucial stages of rapid cognitive, linguistic, and social emotional development in K-Stage 1, which is kinder to grade 3, and leverages the learner's first language or dominant home language to build a bridge towards bilingual proficiency in Filipino and English. So the projected learning trajectory and the impact of the L1 unfolds across the early grade levels to specific milestones. So at the kindergarten, where the learners can express their thoughts freely without the fear of making mistakes in an unfamiliar language, and they can use their first language. Then in grade 1, so there was still the language 1 as a means of support, but there is bridging, translanguaging, so that by grade 2, there is transition from L1 to L2, and by grade 3, there is now the mastery of learners in the L2 language. So it is expected that by using the L1 as the primary medium and the bridge, the language mapping process will ensure that the child's processing capacity is spent on mastering core learning competencies rather than decoding an unfamiliar language. This is the implementation roadmap. So we start with identifying the home language, that is mapping, language mapping. We analyze, we cluster the learners by language. And then we select applying the 4 scenarios, scenario A to scenario D, and then we teach. So we now implement the language with bridging. So that's our implementation. So beginning where the learners are will help us ensure that no child is left behind. Thank you for watching. If you have questions, just type or comment in our comment section below. And mabuhay po tayong lahat. Thank you for watching. Please comment, click here, and subscribe to our channel for more videos.
Like and subscribe to the L&D channel on YouTube using the link youtube.com/@learn2lead channel.